How do I identify when it is time to get out of the relationship?
I think you always know in your gut as well. You just don't always want to admit it because of that hope.
I'm feeling like I'm bending my life out of place to accommodate his life. To me, that's another ingredient that's just not working. This relationship is not working for me.
I chose to match their energy, and I have not had a conversation since.
Hi, it's Debbie.
Hi, it's Caitlyn.
And welcome to Dating at Her Age. Caitlyn, I want to dive into how to know when a relationship is not working and when it's time to move on. Because for a lot of years, I've wondered, is there a recipe, a couple of ingredients that I could red flag that would add up to, hey, this relationship is just not working, Deb. It's time to move on. It would help me recognize it faster. So let's start here. What is the longest amount of time you've stayed in a relationship that just is not working?
Well, I would say, as you know, I've dealt with situationships. And I mean, the longest, and I'll say this because it's going to sound drastic, but it's not like been top of mind for me during this entire time frame, but situationships are very in and out. And so I would say like a decade, honestly.
10
like
years.
I've dealt with that for that long, but as I mentioned, like it wasn't my top priority. I was just kind of letting it be there while it was there,
along.
like while I was going to college, while I was doing all these things. And it wasn't like it got more of an issue within the last 3 to 4 years, I'd probably say, maybe even 5. But it was really because I don't know, I didn't start paying attention to it and realizing how much it was affecting me until like the last 2 years, probably. Because I think that I was still in it up until like this summer, because it's, as I mentioned, it comes and goes.
And how is it affecting you?
It's just a constant state of confusion. Because like I said, I wasn't prioritizing relationships for a lot of that, but I was also allowing misbehavior, disrespect a little bit, but also just allowing this thing to exist that was causing me stress and a lack of peace because it was always there. And in my mind, I was kind of like, I'm single, but I'm not really single because my mind is confused and wrapped up in this.
You want to stay available for him.
Yeah. And it got more intense over the last few years, which led me to, I mean, I've had multiple conversations with this person, but it's led me to just kind of have to make the choice to, I don't know, not necessarily even cut it off, but just like put that energy back into myself and just try to be open to other things. Because I don't think I've ever
instead of
ended
cutting it off, just letting it go.
Yeah, and that's the hardest part. Yeah. So like that's what I've been working on over the last year. And it's hard. It's a lot harder said than done. But yeah, and that's, I think, part of any sort of breakup or end to a relationship is letting go of the hope of what could be. Because when you started dating somebody, you probably started liking them and got this idea in your head that it was going to work and be all rosy and whatnot, and you have to let go of the potential that you made up in your head.
I'm mesmerized by 10 years.
Well, and honestly, maybe from the point that I started just being a friend with this person, it was maybe even probably 11 years. But I don't know. It's really hard to say because I was a different person then, like I said, going to college.
A teenager,
focused
though.
on, yeah, folks. And this is why, like, it's hard because my situation, I don't want to talk too specifically about this, but we'll explain because there's nothing wrong. Like, this person is my friend and there's a lot there that's more than just this situationship. So that's why it's been so on and off, is because they're my friend and I see them often-ish. And I allowed that because I haven't done anything else, really. I've tried to like go on dates and stuff, but I'm just kind of like, I'm too busy. I'm focused on my work, on my schooling, on this. And maybe that's why I allowed the situationship, because I was also okay with it being a situationship until I wasn't.
If you're like me at all, and let me know yes or no, I tend to hold on to hope.
Yeah.
For an inordinate amount of time. And even what I recognize is like I don't run my life in a mass of confusion. Like my life is pretty. I mean, my days are pretty determined, right? I get up at the same time every day. I show up to set our Dave and Dujanovic show and the rundown up with you and Dave at 7 a.m., practically on the dot. Leave work. It could be, 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It kind of depends. But I go home. I work out. My days are pretty set.
Yeah.
And I like my life that way.
I agree.
I get up and I make my bed with intention because I'm not planning on going back to bed that day. And I eat my breakfast and I do everything in a routine. So why would I allow this confusion that you talk about, and I've been there before, in my dating life?
Yeah, because you're holding on to hope.
I'm holding on to hope, and I've been dating for a number of years, as you have. I'm post-divorce, so it's been 8 years since my divorce. So dating on and off, and I've been in a relationship it took me about 1.5 years in one of the relationships to figure out that he's just not that interested in making this a forever relationship. And after I got out of that relationship, and I think when we get out of relationships, at least for me, I can see a lot more clearly, like where I was holding on to hope where there wasn't hope. And then as I reflected on that, I was like, is there just a simple recipe, like 3-ingredient recipe that I can write down and remind myself, these are the ingredients that add up to, he's just, this relationship is just not working. He's not that into me. Deb, recognize this relationship is just not working, and how to know it's not working. And this was the first time that I had recognized that it is as simple as reflecting on those moments that I missed in the relationship. And I'll walk through, it's a 3 ingredient recipe with a bonus ingredient, and I'm going to walk you through that. I think it's helpful to analyze and look back, reflect, postmortem the last relationship, so we don't make the same errors in judgment going forward.
You just reminded me of a Taylor Swift song. It's called "How Did It End," and it's one of the saddest songs she's ever written. And the word postmortem is in that song. But anyways, yeah, I think it's really. Anyways, Tortured Post Department will help you through a breakup, I promise.
You told me to download that, and I listen to it a lot.
I have a lot of thoughts there.
I know that song.
Maybe we could talk about the things that help you through.
I hadn't even drawn that parallel, so you're really aware and astute when it comes to those lyrics.
The line is, "I hereby conduct this postmortem," so it's a deep song. Anyways, sorry.
You're absolutely right.
It's that song's depressing. So, but anyways, where was I going with that? I just think that potential is really hard to let go of, because I feel like I'm still in this right now. It's gotten easier the longer I've I've kind of distanced myself. I've made an active decision, a very hard decision, to just kind of do different things in my life that don't put me directly in it, because the situationship, it's like I just feel like I'm only relevant when I'm standing right in front of you, and then I'm really relevant, and then I'm gone and it doesn't matter. That's been my experience, and it's really hard to process that, even though I don't even know half the time if that's what was going on in this person's mind, but it's how I felt. You just said
something. I'm only relevant if I'm standing in front of you.
That's how I felt.
That is an aha moment for me that I want to take forward from here on out with my future relationships. Am I only relevant? We're going to add that. Now it's a 5-ingredient recipe.
Yeah,
I'm only relevant if I'm standing right in front of him or her, or her.
Yeah.
If you're a man dating and you're feeling confused, or you're not sure if this relationship is working for you, if you're standing in front of her, are you only relevant in that moment?
Yeah. And maybe I'm not. Maybe they think about me all the time, but they don't show me. They don't tell me.
Well, you're not in their head.
Maybe,
right? You're in your own
know.
head. And that's why I think if he was thinking about me all the time, I would be clear on that. It wouldn't be confused.
I would hope so. That's what I'm trying to get into my brain. So.
Okay. So we are going to add, am I only relevant when I'm standing in front of my significant other or my situationship in that moment? We're going to add that to the recipe. And I'm going to start with my ingredients now. There's an even amount of energy going into the relationship. So his energy level is at ground or basement level. And my energy level is like through the roof, where I'm doing the majority of the contact, making the plans, sending the text messages. And in one of my relationships, I was also doing, not hyperbole, 99.9% of the driving. So if I wanted him to grace my presence on a Friday or Saturday night date night, I had to swoop in with my sedan and buckle him in, and I was his rideshare driver to wherever we were going.
And that's okay sometimes, but not all the time.
It was a lot.
Yeah, that's not okay.
When I I remember asking him to come pick me up for dinner, and it just wasn't going to happen. So I ended up getting in the car and driving over to his house to pick him up. It would have been wonderful to, after, a 12, 14-hour workday, which is kind of typical sometimes for me. I can work, long hours, that he would have come over and picked me up and driven me. So that was one of the ingredients that I added to. It's just not working.
I think as a female, we like to take control sometimes. We like to be in control. We like to drive. But really, I want to be picked up. I want to be a passenger princess. I want you to take care of the night.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, to be completely honest.
You want to do it. You want to be the 99.9%.
I just want, this is something that I thought of after we put out our shopping list episode, is something I would have added, is I need to be around someone who lets me shut off my brain. And it kind of works. You need to have an even balance there. You should be that to them. But I want to be able to go around you, and I want you to lead a little bit. I think that that's a new thing that I've thought of, because I think I'm so anxious and stressed and just worried and just trying to do things all the time, that going around your person shouldn't cause any more stress and anxiety or worry most of the time. Yeah, if you're the one who booked the plans and you know where you're going, sure, that's a different situation. But I want them to lead, and I want them to just take me.
I feel like the effort too in a relationship, it's not going to be equal all the time, but it can't be lopsided all of the time. No, it should,
and that's why I was like, I think that there's balance there. You don't have to cater to me every second of every day, but a little bit.
Right.
Okay.
So every, I get up at 4 a.m. I'm not trying to throw myself a pity party, but I get 3:30 or 4 a.m, and at the time I was actually getting up at 3 a.m. And then I would, if I was going out with him on a Friday night, if I could sneak in a nap, that was awesome. But I would pick him up at 7 o'clock at night. We'd go out, come back, and then I'm driving home.
It's a lot. No,
it's a lot with headlights and contact lenses in my eyes, and being awake for 18 hours. I'm like, yeah, this is a sign. It is one of my top ingredients for this is not working. It's not working for me at all, but I'm just holding on to this hope that maybe one day he'll swoop in with his sedan.
And if that's the hardest thing, because it's hope. And I like I said, I'm currently kind of in this just mentally, because this, if I've been dealing with something for 10 years, it doesn't just take a month to get over something, right? There's a lot of potential that you had in your head. Mm-hmm. And, whatever, if it comes back to me, it comes back to me, that happens. But I just think that hope it's embedded in your brain. You just have to bite the dust and realize that what it is. I don't know. It's really hard to do, but they'll show you who they are.
So that is my top ingredient. But of course, now I'm adding your ingredient, which I love. So your ingredient is now my top ingredient in my recipe. And then the other thing I've added is if I'm confused about what we are.
Yeah,
we've already talked to that. Yeah, we've already talked to that issue, and I've confused. And it's taken me years of failed dating situations to recognize that is a red flag that this is not working.
And don't let it go on as long as I did. I think I said that in my situationship episode. But you'll save yourself. It's a lot easier to rip the Band-Aid off sooner rather than later, because it's a big healing process of literally just letting go of the what if. That's the hardest part.
There's also a window of time, though, that I want to give the new relationship a little. I want to show it some grace.
Yes.
I don't expect a month in that we are going to be making a decision about what we are. But 3, 4, 5, 6 months
That's
in.
6 months is way too long. Don't even let it go that far.
I
I
think
think
6
my
months
new
is too
rule
long.
is if you are actively trying to date and trying to find that person and you're really in it, which is something that I realized about myself, is I am open to it and I'm trying to like let myself dive in, but it's scary in that way because I think I do still have attachment issues going on. But I think after 3 months, if it hasn't even like been brought up, and you're consistently talking to this person, there's like a different way. Like you could be talking to someone every day or you could be talking to them every other week. That's different. So I think like 3 months consistently, if there has not been a conversation about like, okay, where are you at with what you want in relationships, or where are you at? Like, what are you looking for? That type of stuff. If that conversation hasn't been brought up, you need to bring it up, in my opinion. You don't have to force it on them, but that's too much time of yours that you just need to redirect it at that point if you're really in it and really wanting to make something change.
Well, it's better than having that conversation is better than just floating along.
Yes.
In that confused state of, what are we?
Yeah.
I wonder when he's going to say we're something.
And it's really not hard if the person is emotionally mature enough to just ask them, because then you just figure it out.
So then my other ingredient is the conversation regularly feels forced.
That's a sign of incompatibility, in my opinion. And that's okay. That's the point of dating, is to figure that out. And if you feel like it's more of a task and you're checking a box and you're just not emotionally invested in it, then yeah.
I would also add to this as a sub-ingredient, it's an optional ingredient, if the silence feels awkward.
That's a big one that you brought up, because I sit in silence a lot. And I think that it is pretty telling for me if I feel uncomfortable in silence, which I don't typically do around most people because I'm just in my head. It's very loud in here, so it doesn't really matter what's happening outside. But if I can't naturally sit in silence with you, it is very telling about just how comfortable I am with you. And that can change over time. Obviously, the first date might be a little awkward because that's just how people interact. But that's a big thing. I don't know, when I come home from the day or late at night, if I am not able to use my words and I'm just tired and I want to sit, this is, I guess, if you're at the point of living with someone or you're just spending an evening with them. If I just want to sit in silence and I can do that comfortably with you and it's not a bother to you, that's great. But if I can't, then that's a problem.
So I love taking road trips, and I take a lot of road trips alone. And part of the beauty of taking road trips is to just shut out the world. Listen to music, maybe listen to a low-key podcast. If I am with somebody on a road trip, a significant other, there will be discussion. Of course, it'll be fun. We'll have a good time together talking things through and getting to know each other. But I also want to be able to enjoy the road trip in a bit of silence. And if that silence just feels awkward, or if he or I am always trying to fill the void with just minutia material to just talk and just keep the conversation going, I think there just has to be a level, it just has to feel organic, it has to feel natural. And that, again, requires me to grow into that and us to grow into that. That might, initially, there's a lot of first date nerves and second date nerves.
You eventually
where we tend to
rapport.
overcompensate for the lack of chatter and to fill the void of silence. But I want to be able to feel like I'm at home with somebody.
Yeah.
I'm not being forced into a conversation all the time. But I'm also not feeling like our conversations that we are having are forced.
Yeah. And I think that level of comfort does take time. Sometimes it's natural, and that's when people are like, okay, you're my person. This is great. And I kind of envy those people who just get that really quick. But I think that silence is a big, big factor.
The bonus ingredient that I've added to my recipe is he doesn't really seem to want to know a lot about me.
Yeah.
And this goes beyond the first date. And I know we've talked about how that can happen on a first date, where we walk away from a first date like, I know his whole life story, but he doesn't even know, much about mine at all because he hasn't asked me questions. Men probably have had this experience with women, not asking them a lot of questions about their lives. And our lives are important to us. And I think back to a time when I was dating a guy for not very long, but long enough that, my kids, my 3 adult kids, are really important part of my life. And I talk to them on a regular basis. They've got great things going on in their lives. And when a man says, oh, kind of forgets that I'm a mom of 3, to me, without being so, at the focus of my life for almost 30 years, that feels dismissive, or that my life isn't important enough for him to remember that really most important detail. I could see that he wouldn't remember something that I told him about my childhood, or maybe a job that I held at one point in my career. It's like, oh, I've got a long resume. You're going to forget. Oh yeah, I forgot you worked there. But those critical details, if it's been a hot minute that we've been dating, and he's dismissive of them, doesn't remember them, that to me is a sign that he's just not that into my life or learning a lot about my life.
Or just not understanding the family values almost. Because I think that is, like, if somebody else has kids, you would think, maybe this person, whoever may not, but you would think that's top of mind for them, so that would be top of mind for you.
I once had somebody tell me of a man I was dating that it seemed like I was bending in my life out of place to accommodate his life.
Yeah.
And as you and I were talking this through, like, I'm not remembering somebody I'm not remembering. I have, 3 kids. I was thinking, I remember somebody telling me that about a man I was dating. It's like, you are doing so much for him that it's almost as though you're bending your life out of place to accommodate his life. So again, another sub-ingredient to that. It's not only that he's not asking about the details of my life, he doesn't remember the important details of my life, but I'm feeling like I'm bending my life out of place to accommodate his life. To me, that's another ingredient that's just not working. This relationship is not working for me.
Yeah, and I think that just going along with that, if it's disturbing your peace more than it's adding value and comfort to your life, that's probably just a red flag that it may not be what's for you. Or if you want to work through that and just sometimes if you just explain things and someone is willing to change, and maybe they're just not aware of all of that, which might be a problem. But I don't know. I tend to give people benefit of the doubt, which is why I'm in the situations I'm in sometimes. But I think that it just shouldn't be causing you so much stress or bend, I guess, in your life.
What's the perfect cooking time for this recipe? Like, what is the perfect cooking time? Like, at the bottom of the recipe, it's like, put this in the oven at 375 for how many minutes, and convert those to months. To me, the ingredients have to be perfectly mixed, because I don't want to have just one of these ingredients necessarily be the deal breaker, unless it's just like horribly obvious in some cases. Like the uneven energy in the relationship is one that comes to mind, where it's just extremely obvious in the beginning. Then that's just enough for me to pull the plug on the entire relationship. But what's the perfect cooking time for something? Is it 3 months? Is it 4 months?
I have no idea. I really don't even think there is a timeline. I think that things unveil themselves after so long. I would say like 3-4. You could probably know just off of energies based off of that quick, but it might be 6 months. It might be a year where you kind of put your effort into it and you're just realizing throughout all those seasons that it's not working because it's not serving what you need.
See, at my age, 1 year feels like a dog year. It feels like 7 years because I'm going on 58. Not quite there yet. 6 months from now, I'll be 58.
Maybe 6 months is a better one. I don't know, but I tend to drag things out to see the best.
What would be your comfort level? If let's put your situationship aside for a moment.
Different story.
And if you had uneven energy from somebody, if you were with somebody who just disregarded the important details in your life, or you were bending over backwards to accommodate his life, what would be the amount of time that you would want to put up with that?
I'd say after I get past the initial dating and the excitement. So maybe that's a month. You get, as if you're consistently talking to someone. I would say 3 or 4 months is actually a good time to know if you're willing to adjust and change things. But if it's causing you more stress than peace before you started talking to this person, then yeah, you can probably figure that out pretty quickly. So
I have, I told you I've asked in the past when I've been in what I thought was a relationship, what are we? And I asked that after 3 months, and I did not get a good answer. I did not get a solid answer. I just didn't get really any answer. I got a word salad of answers, and I accepted that, and I stayed in it.
And that's a choice.
But it wasn't the right choice for me.
No, it's not. And knowing if I don't have a strong attachment to the person, I'd be fine to cut that off and be like, okay, that's not what I'm wanting it to be, and you're not wanting it to be. If it's meant to come back and you're ready, let me know. But I'm not going to sit here waiting. That's kind of my new perspective and mindset. But it's hard to know when you get the word salad and you're like, okay, well maybe they'll change their mind and they just need a little bit more time to figure it out, because sometimes that's valid. But after a certain point,
but that's the hope.
That's the hope. And
I remember sitting there and hearing him say these words like, well, whatever he was saying, it was a mix. It was like a spring salad mix of different lettuces. But he was so responding to me, and I was just like, I have no idea what you're saying. But in my head, I was like, well, maybe he'll change his mind.
No, and I still do that. Like, I would be lying if I told you that I didn't think about that sometimes.
See how wonderful I am.
But I think about it as be like, oh, he's going to have an epiphany. And so, like, it's just, and you know what? Sometimes that actually happens. Not saying that you should have your hopes up, but just,
I want to know.
I think people realize what they have when it's gone. So maybe it takes the cutoff for that to happen, because I do think people always come back. In my experience, not just with the one person, but I've had that happen to me a few times.
Where I want to get with this, though, in my dating brain is whatever happens with his dating brain when I'm gone happens. Yeah. But I don't want to, like, I'll show you it.
No, no. That's
what I want to do is control it, and that's why I came up with these ingredients. Everybody's got probably their own recipe too. Like my ingredients doesn't work for your recipe. You come up with your own ingredients. That's a great thing. We're all recreating this from scratch, But I don't want to base my decisions on whether this is right for me or not right for me. Like, oh, well, maybe he'll change his mind and he'll miss me when I'm gone.
And you absolutely should not base a decision on the fact that they might come back. That's not what I was trying to say. My thought with that was you make the decision based off of your ingredients and the cooking thing. And it's more, they probably will come back, but it's almost a too bad, so sad, because you missed your opportunity. And if the fates align later on in life, but it's a lot of the time it's just not your person.
And when they do come back, it's like, I'm healed now from this.
Hopefully. And you've put that energy into yourself.
I'm healed from the hope.
You realize what you want, and it wasn't that. But if people come back with changed energy and are really showing action, that's the only thing that matters to me. Have I seen that yet? No. But I think people can grow and change, but I'm also 29. So you probably see it differently than I do, because I tend to see people change things a lot in this phase of their life, of getting it together, I guess, and settling down and stuff like that.
What is getting back to the original conversation that we had about your situationship? Is there no more hope?
On my end, I wouldn't say there's no more hope for what our situation is on my end, because I've basically just had to make the decision, even though the last time I spoke to this person about the situation, because I've kind of, there's like a friend relationship there, and then there's this weird messy situationship that doesn't ever get solved, but the friend relationship is always going to be there. That's the hard part, because I can't just cut them out of my life. So that's like, I guess I don't talk to them consistently, but I'm going to see them again. It just is what it is. We're embedded. But I have had to make the decision that it's not serving me, and I haven't had closure on it from this person. And it's really hard, because you have to give yourself that closure. And I'm still kind of working on that, but it's gotten easier the more time that's passed, because it's been a really hard just past few months, because the last time I talked to them about this was maybe 4 months ago. And it just goes in circles, because it's like the words match what I want in a lot of ways, but the action is not there. Because like I said, I'm not in front of them, so they're not, maybe they're thinking about it. I have no idea. but I don't see that. I see nothing the next day. And what I decided to do after that is, well, first I'll back up a little bit. Something that helps me is to write down the facts, like kind of a pro and con list, because a lot of the times the facts, they have to outweigh the emotion. And when you put it like on paper, it helps you see that.
So would a fact be what?
This person does not talk to me.
Oh.
Like things like that. Yeah. They don't make me a priority. They do not make plans. I don't know. They only acknowledge me when I'm in front of them or things like that.
And when you see that.
And when you can write that out and then you have the emotions, like I like them. They make me feel happy, but they also make me feel sad. Like it's a weird, complicated emotion. And like the positives are just like, I see the potential. Like it really is there. Like this person's a good person and you know that, but they're not doing this, and this. And it's just, and then you can see other people who are in relationships that actually be like, okay, it's not that hard to just like ask someone to hang out or make a plan consistently. So it's just, that's something that helped me. And so that's just one way of kind of assessing it. I think if you are confused or if you are wondering, like if you need to make a move to end things or whatever, but when you have to do it on your own and you don't even really get a conversation with this person, like, could I have a conversation? Yeah, I could probably reach out, but I made the decision to do no contact. And that's basically, the door has still been open. And I've done this multiple times. This is not my first time doing this. And I usually cave. Someone caves. I haven't done it yet, but it's matching their energy. Like, I'm just not going to be the one to reach out and make the plan. I'm matching their energy. And if they make a move, I'll engage and I'll talk to them or whatever. But I chose to match their energy and I have not had a conversation since other than the time that I had seen him a few times.
So you went with my first ingredient, the uneven energy.
Yeah, it's a really big one, and that's defining more situationship, I think. But I think that can be many relationships where one person is pulling more of the weight.
Do you realize when you were saying that, if I let a situationship go on for 10 years, I would be going on 68 years old?
Yeah, and I just want to say there were different levels to the 10 years. It's just kind of it started 10 years ago. There were different phases of how much it affected me. And the last few were very intense and that's why I've tried to end this situation many times before, but it always ended up just resurfacing. So,
well, my point to saying that is, I'll be qualified for Social Security by the time,
and it's different.
By the time
I was
this thing
20,
is floating on
so.
and on and on. Right? It's different in my view. Like we've talked about this in the past. The amount of runway, is much longer than mine. Like I'm nose up, like straight up in the air right now. So the baking time, if you will, if we can go back to that analogy, on a startup of a relationship with me cannot be 10 years.
No. And it can't be for me either. I'm not doing that. Absolutely not. I've learned, and I just think like I said, I was 20-ish when this first started, totally not my priority. Moved in, changed it to a priority, had to do something different, and it sucks to do something different. It's really hard to do it. But I will never let that go on that long again, because it was on and off for 10 years. There were things embedded in between. I have other experiences in that time, but that was the main focal point of relationship status.
Well, I love your advice, especially you talk about, if you've asked him and you've talked about what are we after 3 months, a few months, and it's nothing, you don't get a good response, especially at my age. I think the timelines are going to be different. The younger you are, you probably do feel like there's a lot more leeway there. Again, it's not that I'm rushed to get into a relationship at all. I just don't want to be spinning on something that I know is not working for me based on this like ad hoc recipe that I've come up with. But for me, coming up with those different ingredients was helpful, because I was just trying to figure out, like, how do I identify when it is time to get out of the relationship?
I think you always know in your gut as well. You just don't always want to admit it because of that hope, like we mentioned. And I think one thing to add into that is a question to ask: do you feel safe around this person and kind of at peace, as I mentioned, Or do you feel anxious or nervous, like you have to be the one to get it going and like make plans and do stuff like that? There's just an energy there. Like, do you feel safe and calm? Because that's a good sign. But if you don't, then you may need to like assess why that is. And it kind of takes a lot to go internally and figure out what that is that's triggering that. But yeah, I think that your gut instinct knows a lot, and you know when things need to end. It's just about getting there to say it out loud and face the music with that.
It's something I've learned going to therapy is write it down too.
Yeah.
We this is my experience. I have a short memory with stuff like this. It's easy to move on to a new relationship and then forget why the other one didn't work out. And then repeat the same mistakes. Like, why is it not working? Honestly, as I wrote these few things down, I realized there was a common thread throughout a lot of my relationships. It's not like I have relationships that are just, happening and popping up all the time. So that didn't come out right. But when I do get into a more serious relationship, or I meet somebody who I think is the one, I've met the one, and then you find out a month later, well, maybe he's not the one, but there's hope. So I'm just going to hang on here. I just feel like writing these things down is the key to not continuing to put myself through months and months and months of, added turmoil in my emotions, and just be like, because when they're in your life, speaking of situationships, and it's not working, so much of your energy is just going to something that's just not working.
Yeah, and that's it. Really, you lose sleep over it, and just like going through all of the scenarios.
Well, let me give you an example of this. When I say, talk about something that's not working. There was a time not too long ago that I was driving a car that I loved. It was 10 years old. Loved this car. Knew I was going to hold on to forever. Like the last guy I dated. I was going to hold on to this car forever. Well, it started to financially drain me and emotionally drain me because it required like so much of my energy. I was constantly thinking about like, I got to get it into the shop now because it has an oil leak. Now I got to get it into the shop because something's broken on it. It's making a funny sound. I remember I leaned out the window through my car and park, leaned out the window at the bank ATM, and I'm like, that's a really weird squeal that just started after I'd left the gym. What is going on? And I drove it in. The next morning I had to drive it in, and they're like, you cannot leave with this car. It needs $3,000 in an oil pan. And I was like, I don't know. My head was spinning. But this car was consuming so much of my time. And you knew this because I was working with you. I'm like, I got to leave. I got to get my car back in. It's like, what is going on with your car? Well, just things start to break, right? After 10 years, 150,000, whatever miles I had on it. But I wasn't going to get rid of that car. I was holding on to hope that the more time and money and energy I dumped into this car, the better this car would be. Well, you know what? Last December 2023, I walked into a dealership and I'm like, I'm done. I've lost all hope with this car. Will you take it as a trade-in? Now, it was running beautifully because I had put so much time and love and money into this car. So they were like, gladly, because it looks awesome and it's running great and things have all been fixed. Do you know what I haven't stressed about in the last almost year now?
Yeah.
Is my car.
Yeah. No, it's a great analogy.
I got a new car, and I wasn't ever going to buy a new car. Like, I was just going to keep driving this car until I was well into my Social Security years, But I was holding on to hope that this car would magically become a 2014 again. You know what I mean? It was just, and would run like a brand new car.
Fix itself.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no, that's a great analogy and a great way to look at that. Sometimes you just need to...
So I dumped the car. Took me a little while to get there. But I feel better. I feel less chaos in my life. I feel more organized in my life. When I get up in the morning, I know the car that I have now is going to start.
And you're not obsessing over it.
I'm not thinking about it all the time. It's not draining my energy. It's giving me the same energy that I'm giving it.
Do you still think about your old car?
Sometimes.
Because I think that's one of the hardest
Just because I thought about it last weekend.
Yeah.
Which happens with old boyfriends too.
But reminisce on the good times and not the negative times. We have a previous episode that is called How to Remove Someone from Your Brain. And I think that it actually could be very helpful if you haven't heard that episode. Everybody who's listening, Debbie shared tips on how to remove someone from your brain. So if you do have to make the decision to end it with someone, there's some ways on moving past that. And it actually helped me a lot. And one tip,
good.
Write it down. It
Write
does
it down.
help.
So this time we've got an email from one of our listeners, and I'm going to read it to you, Caitlyn. And she's talking about our episode on situationships. Now, we just got done talking about your situationships or one of your situationships for this episode. But if you haven't heard the entire episode on situationships and how to get your brain wrapped around it and remove the situationship from your brain, go back and binge our previous podcast episode. But this listener writes, all I can say is, wow. You were talking about my life with a man I've known for 40 years. Met him at age 15, and now I am 56. My attachment was so strong to this man, but I did some internal work and finally decided I was done. This was a great listen and assurance that my decision was spot on. Thank you for recording this podcast topic. Well, thank you so much for that email. And Caitlyn, I want to get your reaction to this because I feel like you have really spearheaded our conversations and pushed us into conversations about situationships, which so many people find themselves trapped in.
Which, unfortunately, yeah, I wish I didn't have that experience. But that's the thing. Like, that's so long to have that in your life. But I get it. As I mentioned in this one, I'm still trying to move on from situationships, and they linger because they come in and out into your brain, and it is really hard to disconnect from them when they just kind of try to keep a grasp of you in your brain. I've had people after that episode come out as well said that they identified those patterns in their marriage. Like, at least you got to the marriage part, but it felt like a situationship. So, it's just kind of, it's so relatable. It's almost comforting, but I am sorry that we're all going through that.
I want to go back to this age of 15, now being 56 years old. Okay, so situationships were a thing because she's about my age, right? We're a year apart. She was probably the class of 1986, if I'm guessing right. I was the class of 1985 in high school. She was 15. It's a formative year. We're teenagers. I remember being that age as a teenager, and I had the biggest crush on somebody who was a classmate in high school. The biggest crush. Caitlyn, I remember driving up to northern Arizona. I grew up in Arizona, backseat of my parents' car, just sitting in silence next to my sister, who's my best friend in the world, and praying quietly to myself. Nobody knew I was praying. That this classmate would notice me.
Yeah.
Like, I had such a crush on him that I was praying to a higher power that by Monday morning he would be paying attention to me. And, he never did. He never did. Now, he didn't stay on my mind for the last 40 years. Is that 40 years? It's more than 40 years. However, there have been moments through like my 8+ years outside of divorce that I've thought, I wonder whatever happened to him. Like, I wonder if is there a chance? Is there a chance? Like, that crush, I could go revisit. Maybe he felt that way, and at the time it just didn't feel right for him. Like, I don't know. We were 15, 16. But knowing now what I know about his situation, and where life has taken him, it's not on the same journey that life has taken me. And I just want to be conscientious that I'm respectful of where he's at in his life, so I don't want to divulge a lot. But what I have since found out, because I still talk to a lot of people who we all kind of connect in the same circles, even this long outside of high school, that the universe saw something that I didn't.
And the universe, when I'm having a hard time letting go of stuff like I have been recently and over the past few years, I just am like, the universe has it under control because you have to let go of that. And then you'll see why later.
There's a reason why he didn't fall madly in love with me.
Yes. Or even if he did, there's a reason why
on the
it wouldn't
tennis
have worked
court
out.
in my senior year in high school. And so I feel for our listener who wrote this email, because I think, first of all, teenage years are very formative years. We can tend to, I want to say I even mistook love for a crush for love. You know, I was madly in love, but I was really I was really crushing on this kid in high school. And those were the good times too. I'll just be honest with you, right? I mean, high school for me anyways, it's not the case for everybody, those are some pretty awesome memories. And so when I think about high school and I think about him, I'm like, oh, it wouldn't be great if we just rekindled this lopsided love that I had for him and move on. But then that other comment that she made in that email, that she's done the work.
Yeah.
And recognizing that I have had to do the work and sit across from my therapist and cry my eyes out and be like, why am I so attached to somebody who is just not right for me? It's just not going to be the right relationship, but I'm so attached and I can't stop thinking about him. I'm going to give you a little trick that I use. This is just a little bit, maybe it sounds like a mind game I play with myself, but it works for me. When I am leaving a relationship now, I put that person, like in my mind, in the rearview mirror of my car. And they're standing there and I am slowly driving away because it takes, I don't want to, punch it to 100 miles an hour, but I'm slowly driving away. And as I'm watching him in the rearview mirror, our relationship is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, to the point where finally, when I'm far enough down the road, I've lost sight of him and I've lost sight of the relationship. I've had to kind of play that out in my mind. It works for me.
It does.
Sometimes I circle back though. Yeah. Like I do make a U-turn in the cul-de-sac. And I'm like, oh, let me just.
Yeah.
But I feel like to some degree, maybe not to the extent she was, I've been there with a young, with the relationship or the thought of relationship that I had back when I was in high school.
Yeah. And I mean, that distance really does help, even though it's unfortunate and it's a choice you sometimes don't want to make, but you have to.
Your situationship you talked about at 19, was that the only situationship?
No. So I was about to pivot into that. My first, the word situationship didn't exist. It was thing. I had a thing with a person. And I'll be honest, now that I'm older, I think it wasn't my first kind of experience with a guy paying attention to me, but it was the first one that consistently did it and kind of hung out with me a lot, talked to me every day. And I hadn't quite had that. And I was, I think 15 or 16. I was around that age. Another Taylor Swift song, 15. It'll get you through high school, by the way. But it wasn't inconsistent and toxic in that time when we both, there was a time where we both lived in the same town and, we would hang out on the weekends and it was pretty consistent, but it was a while, it never really developed into a relationship. It was just, it was a situationship. It just didn't last as long. And I got the closure from that one that I have not gotten from this other one that I merged into. But as soon as I kind of wrapped that one up and kind of had accepted that it was not going to be a thing, my next one kind of presented itself, which there wasn't a lot of space there, but it didn't develop quickly. It was just oh, I have something else to pay attention to. But when I was younger and I first started talking to my first, situationship, I guess, at 16 or so, I realize now, I wonder if I was so infatuated by it because he was really the person that gave me attention. And was I just wanting that? And that's why I liked them. I didn't really have issue with him. There's no problem or anything like that. I don't necessarily know what he does with his life now, but I know that we're better off as friends.
How long did that one last?
It was probably until 18, 19, right until that my mind was consumed with it. But
have you emotionally held on or mentally held on to him?
Not now. It took me a while. I always was curious. I think once I kind of got into my 20s, I thought about him a little bit. I think I engaged a little, but we had more of a clear cut. Like it was established like, hey, I don't think that I'm wanting this. I'm interested in others, whatever. And then the line still got blurred a little every now and then, which is why I was like kind of confused by it. But it was more direct and I was able to cut it off. I didn't see him ever. Like our friend line didn't cross as often as my current one does. So it wasn't like it didn't come back to life for me that often. And now like I have him on social media and I think that I could be friends with him. I don't think that we were meant to be in a relationship. And I see that now. Just based off of how our lives have gone in different directions. So it's another universe plan that I think that we had a connection, obviously, and that connection's probably still there. He's probably still my friend and we're compatible in that way, but I don't think it's anything more.
Sounds to me like there's a lot of people who get mentally connected, emotionally connected to somebody, and even 30, 40, 50 years later can still have that person on their brain. Yeah. And the important thing is you do the work that works for you. For me, especially if they are consuming a lot of my, my mental space, it's like I maybe need to go talk to somebody about this. Yeah. I'm not advocating one way or the other for therapy. That's just what works for me. It's like I need to start writing things down.
Both
also,
of those things.
I will tell you the other. There's another anecdote, I guess, for this. Vaccine, whatever, for this is if you've lost contact with them and you're romanticizing what it was like 40 or 50 years ago, what solves it for me is finding, out through friends of friends or through social media that their life took them on a totally different journey that is just not compatible with mine. And you know what I am after that? I'm cured.
And that works though because that's their journey. Yeah. And if your journeys end up meeting a long, long ways away,
but our journeys together don't make sense.
They don't always know. And that's you. And sometimes it's okay to know that. Sometimes you want to completely cut them off. But once you get that reality of, okay, this is why this all makes sense now, because you usually see it when you're farther away from it and you've learned. And I'll say that work that you have to do for yourself is really hard and it probably consists of a lot of crying. But it's beneficial in writing things down as well, just your feelings and putting them on paper so you can really process those. It helps, even though it's hard and you don't want to deal with it, but it's okay to cry and feel and deal with it because it's going to all explode eventually. So.
If you have a dating story that you want to share, we have a hotline for you. It's 801-575-5599, 801-575-5599. Leave us a message, and we may play it back on the air.
And if you have a story you want to share just by email, you can send us an email. It's daha@ksl.com. That's daha@ksl.com. You can find us on all the social media platforms at Dating at Her Age, and we'll have a new episode for you every Thursday.